I had a moment where I stopped and thought, I was about 5 steps away from the C train. That might be a better place for me. I was in front of that. You ask yourself, do I want to live today? And then I spent 4 years hurt and being an absolute failure, to the point where I was literally kicked out of the training room my senior year, my 4th year in university, because I was a waste of everybody's time. I was told, you're not worth their time. You're not allowed to go to the training room anymore. That's how broken I was. And I competed in the Olympic Games with 6 guys, and I had to bury 2 of them by the time I was about 40 years old. That will really change your perspective.
How can you get a team to create this vision together?
All I know is I'm going to learn from this, and I'm going to make sure that if I get another shot like this, that these won't be the things that are going to stop us.
What are the ingredients that go into excellence?
I think that you see people who have
What does it take to create excellence in your life, in your business, in your relationships, in your health, in sport? Well, in today's episode, we have Steve Mesler, an Olympic gold medalist, a Hall of Fame athlete. And as I was traveling to Calgary, I'm in Canada, I was researching the guests to have on the show, and Steve jumped out as a person which I needed to get on the show purely because how much can we learn from a man who hasn't just got to the Olympics? He's actually created a gold medal, right? What does it take to create that? And I thought like we can all learn so much from the ingredients that went into that level of success. And in this episode, you can expect nothing less than that. We dive into what are the differences between a team that plays at a good level and a team that actually is a winning gold. Like what goes into that? What mentality? What happens behind the scenes? So we share that in detail. Also, Steve shares about different challenges that some of his teammates had, and also that he had personally in his mental health and with depression, and also like what ingredients went into that as well. And so we can learn from that. And one of the key pieces that pulled out was the identity shifting. Like imagine an Olympic gold medalist and then transitioning out of that sport into the world. Like what is going on internally for that, and how can you shift identity in a healthy way? And I believe that we can learn from that because we're all shifting and changing so fast, right? And so listening to this episode is an absolutely amazing one. And if you're new here to the Transformation Code, welcome. And if you're a regular listener, thank you for being part of the community. We're growing, we're thriving. And it's a pleasure to have you here. So listen into today's episode and let this code activate something deep within. Enjoy. All right, so today we have Steve on the show. Steve's an Olympic gold medalist, someone that's reached the pinnacle of success in his career. And I'm fascinated to dive deep into what created and the mindset behind how you created that level of success so people can learn from it.
Yep.
Like, what did you learn from creating that a gold medal, but also what did you have to overcome internally to create that level of success?
Yeah, it took probably 3 or 4 different iterations of myself, from being a 17-year-old national champion in high school in the U.S. So track and field, which is about one of the hardest things you can do at that age in sport, is becoming in the U.S. where the talent is so broad and so deep to reach that level. And then getting to the University of Florida, which is a Division I school where everybody's going in a scholarship. And that is the goal at that point. So I had reached my first goal, which was going to a big school and getting a scholarship to go there and living that dream. And then I spent 4 years hurt and being an absolute failure, to the point where I was literally kicked out of the training room my senior year, my 4th year in university, because I was a waste of everybody's time. I was deemed at that point not good enough, not worth the time of student trainers who were 2nd-year university students who were learning what a muscle was. I was told, you're not worth their time. You're not allowed to go to the training room anymore.
Wow.
That's how broken I was, and how much of a crutch the training room had become for me. It was a place that would validate me. It was a place that would work with me. It was the place where I felt understood in a way. And they were leaning in because they were learning how to do these things. So they were all about it as well. So when I decided to move into bobsled after that, which in retrospect, I had really no right to think that I could go and be successful. but I really didn't want to think that I peaked when I was 17 years old. And the mindset change, and we can dive back into that if you want to, but the mindset change for me had to be everything that I thought I was supposed to be doing to be successful wasn't working for me. And, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So for me to be able to make that change, I had to think, all right, I'm going to have to just do this differently. And I'm going to have to not focus on an injury, or if I feel a little hamstring pull, or if you feel the little, if you hear the little dink in your car and it goes dink, 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 well, you take it to the garage so it doesn't become a big thud and you don't ruin your car. Same thing as a high performance athlete. That's what you learn, but that wasn't working for me. So I just decided just wasn't going to get hurt anymore. So that was kind of the first evolution for me, was just don't get hurt anymore. And it seems both simple and stupid at the same time, because you can't control some of those things. But it turned out that I could, if I just kind of pushed my way through those processes. And then the next evolution would happen where I moved to Calgary and I learned what high performance really was. I started working with a guy named Stu McMillan, one of the best strength and speed coaches in the entire world. Huberman was on roll just this past year. And then a guy named Pavle Jovanovic moved up, and Pavle was the best push athlete in the world previously. And Pavle taught me what hard work was. I thought I was working hard until I met Pavle Jovanovic. And Pavle was the guy who would do 1,000 crunches every night. He was the guy who would stretch every night. He was the guy who, when you'd go to Europe, when the American bobsledders would go to Europe, we'd lose weight. The food was different, especially back then. The access to familiarity was different. So you'd lose weight. Well, you can't lose weight as a bobsledder. You need to be big, giant, strong, muscular guys. And Pavle was a guy who just didn't accept that. We would bring a George Foreman. If you remember the George Foreman grills, remember those things?
Yeah.
So we would bring a George Foreman grill on tour with us because, well, we'd not enough protein. So we just bring a George Foreman grill. We go to the market and we get meat because the food that was cooked at the hotel wasn't good. So I learned that through over time. And eventually, by the time we won a gold medal, I had that tuned in to the point where we were just unbreakable and unbeatable at that point.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is like there was people along the way that you were learning from, like the experts in their field, and also just people like this Pavlos who had this level of resilience that you were like, wow, I can learn from this. But where do you think that work ethic came from?
When I look at Pavle,
yeah,
these things come from, for people, they come from different areas. I mean, I think that a lot of these is, how do you tap into those primal goals, those primal urges that we have, and how do you tap into those things to understand how to make yourself content as you're pursuing something, while being able to just get further and further and further down the rabbit hole of what mastery looks like. And for Pavle, I think part of that was, we all have these, and high performers themselves are really quite often driven by a not good enough feeling. And that not good enough feeling for, our ancestors was really helpful. It was really helpful to feel like you needed more water and more food for your family and for your tribe. And you needed more resources because the resources might run out, and or winter was coming and you needed more. So people who had that drive and that urge, they did better and they procreated, and then they passed that on. And I think for a lot of athletes, and Pavle especially, that feeling of not being good enough, you got to act on it. And that's, anxiety produces, either cortisol and stress, or it produces action. And, for high performance, quite often anxiety will produce action. And if you're around a coaching staff and if you learned what the proper actions are to take, some people just take actions and they're not actually productive for themselves. But if you have proper coaching and then you've learned and you're a student of it all, and Pavle was an absolute student, then that anxiety can turn into action, and then that action turns into results for you. So I think for Pavle, it really came from that feeling of, not quite being good enough, which then turns into mastery in a lot of ways. It also came from just a drive for wanting that success for so many different reasons. And that sometimes that success is to, make you feel like you have, like you're good enough, but also that's success is sometimes status and having other people see that. And I think all those things are real. Those are real feelings that people have that we don't talk about enough, and ultimately deep down. And for a guy like Pavle, the problem is is that, let's see, that was Pavli and I lived together from 2003 to 2008, give or take, and trained together, and you're brothers and best friends. And in 2020, Pavli took his own life, and he was not part of our gold medal team. He lost his spot to a guy named Justin Olson. Pavli had a little bit of an injury, and Justin was healthy and fresh and young, and came in and got put in that seat. And Pavli was never able to focus that energy on something else again. And if you can't focus that, like I said, if you can't focus that anxiety and stress for productive means, kind of can sometimes go into non-productive means. And then eventually that's where it took Pavli.
Yeah, I was about to actually ask, like, what is that energy that's then produced to create the gold medal or create like a high level of success and a high performer, when it's driven from not enoughness, which, you know, we all have that inside of us somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But I was going to share, like, what impact does that have on in other areas of life outside of sport? Yeah, which, you know, that's
I mean, I think when you're in it, you have so much ability to just focus that energy there, and then you're tired the rest of the day. The rest of your day is rest and recovery, and that's having the discipline to have the rest and recovery is the hard thing sometimes. Having the recovery days, having the recovery weeks even is the hard thing. Working hard is table stakes at that point. But when you're out of sport, that's where it kind of can fall apart.
Yes. What did that bring up for you? Like losing someone that you had trained so close with, lived with.
Yep.
And I know there was another team member as well that had like took his own life too.
Yeah. I mean, and I competed in the Olympic Games with 6 guys, and I've had to bury 2 of them. And I had to bury 2 of them by the time I was about 40 years old. And that will really change your perspective, to say the least. And for me, it turned into, I retired in 2010, and in 2019, I found myself in a deep depression. You've now been in Calgary now. Welcome to Calgary. You've gone down. Have you spent time downtown?
Yeah, I spent a bit of time downtown and traveled around a bit.
And walked around a bit. Yeah. It's nice. It's a nice downtown.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Yeah. And they've got those walkways that you can walk like all the way through, like miles and miles downtown.
Yeah, the plus 15s. I mean, you're here and the weather's nice, but man, in the middle of the winter time, that is a godsend.
I can only imagine. Even now it's getting cold. Yeah, I can only imagine when it's minus 30 degrees.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Yeah. Nice. And the sun is only up from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and the rest of the time it's just dark. So I asked that because you've been downtown, which means you've passed the C train, which is the light rail system that runs through there. So for me, how that eventually unraveled and was a real seminal turning point in my entire life was I was in a deep depression. It was January, February, March, April of 2019. So 9 years after I retired, a year before Pavli took his life, 2 years after Steve Holcomb lost his life, was my driver on my gold medal team. And I was in a deep depression. I was walking between meetings and the C train was going by. And I had a moment where I stopped and thought, I was about 5 steps away from the C train, and that might be a better place for me. It was in front of that. And when you're in those moments, you ask yourself, do I want to live today, is a question that gets asked, or at least a question that I ask myself when I've talked to other people who are in these situations, and they ask themselves a very similar question. And if the answer is no, that's it. There's no more questions. We actually don't know that you asked yourself that question. And when the answer is yes, really, really fast, you have to get to why. Because when you're in that deep of a depression, like if you and I right now, assuming hopefully you're in a relatively decent state of mind, asking yourself if you want to live today isn't a real question.
Yeah, of course.
It's I mean, it's just it's not a real question to ask yourself. When you find yourself in a point when it is a real question, and you do say, yes, I do want to live today, but you can't come up with a reason why, you really quickly go back to, well, do I really want to live today? So for me, that was where it all finally kind of went off the rails, and I'm grateful it did. I wouldn't recommend rolling the dice. I don't recommend somebody go find depression to get to a life-changing moment. But like any other part of life, and I found myself, just like I found myself sitting on the couch, but it's 2 days out of surgery after my track career was ended, which is how I got into bobsled, when I hit this point where I guess my track career is over. I guess my sport career is over. I guess I peaked when I was 17. And then I went and found bobsled. So I had this feeling of I've been here before, and man, did some great stuff happen when I chose yes at that point. So for me, that was a big life-changing moment where all of these feelings and thoughts and not being able to really focus or understand what I was doing in my Olympic world came to a point where I needed a change. And I already had a child at that point. I was CEO of the organization that I started. It was growing. It was big. Life was externally good.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing and being vulnerable with that, because it's something that the stats are crazy for the amount of men, especially who commit suicide, and it should be spoken about. And
Men are really good at it.
Yeah,
women have more suicidal thoughts and tendencies. Men finish the job 6-1 better. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing there is the transition from moving out of professional, Olympic sport, then into a different world is like a big identity shift. Like, how can someone move through an identity shift as big as that, or in an identity shift that's meaningful for them in this moment of time?
Yeah,
in a productive, healthy way.
It is. I'm in the process of writing a book right now on this, on a similar strand of the question you just asked there. And I think ultimately the question comes down to is like looking at, and whether it's sport or whether it is a better time in your life. Many people listening will have had these times in their life where they reflect on, be like, oh, those are the days. I was working hard. I was pushing hard. I had goals. I had a team. I had questions. I didn't know I was going to get there. So I had this unknowns that I was pursuing, and nothing was a done deal. And that was great. And they're now either comfortable or they're just not able to find that. And I think the first thing you want to do is just step back and go, like, what am I trying to do? Like, what are my goals? And I can look back in sport, and we had this Disneyland goals environment. All four of us knew exactly what the goal was. It was to win the Olympics, win an Olympic gold medal for the first time in 62 years for the US. It was a big, hairy, audacious goal. And all of us were effectively single. None of us were married with kids. Saying this as a married with 2 kids. We had girlfriends, things like that, but we were effectively single.
Yeah.
No one was worrying about their next job. No one's worried about their next promotion. No one's worried about their bonus. No one's worried about their salary. No one's worried about anything else, which meant that every single effort, energy, moment, thought got to be about this goal. It didn't have to be about this goal. It was a privilege to get to be about this goal. It meant when I gave you feedback, it said, Sam, man, like, we got to talk about like the way that you're eating in the evenings and what this looks like. You got to talk about that. We have to have this conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting with from the goal setting side of things, how you were able to line up your life without any distractions. You have one big, hairy goal to work towards.
Exactly. And what that turns into is it turns into when I have feedback for you. Sam, we got to talk about what you're eating in the evenings. You may think that I'm right or wrong. You may get a little defensive or not, but ultimately, that I'm saying this because I need you at your best and you need me at my best. So no matter what you feel or think or your reaction to it, or whether I'm right or wrong, you get over it real fast, and we're actually able to have that conversation. And that was amazing. And it doesn't exist in real life. I've talked to military guys about this, and they have that when they're on mission. They're in the field, they're out, and the enemy is across the way, and they're figuring something out. But as soon as they get back to base, they got to call home. They got to make sure the money got into the bank account and the mortgage is paid and all these other things. And they have those responsibilities. We had no other responsibilities other than this. And that you can't get. That's a wonderful season in life. It was an experience that most people don't get. Even at the highest flying startups, people have different motivations and goals for why they're there. And some like the pursuit of it, some like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We all had only one goal, and it wasn't about anything other than doing that thing. And when you move into the rest of life, you realize it doesn't work that way. It takes a little while. It takes a little while to realize that not everybody around you has the same goal. So when I founded Classroom Champions, and then eventually went and started hiring people, it's a great idea. Yeah, it's got a lot of legs. This is going to be easy to grow. Oh, it turns out like you don't want it as bad as I do. I had never actually worked with somebody in that way. When I was passionate about something, everybody else around me was passionate, including the coaching staff and our mechanics and Stu, who I moved up here for. That's a real big shift to have to take place when it comes to, it's not just an identity shift of yourself, it's your perspective on other people. And it's hard to lead like that for a little while. It's hard to lead. You don't know how to motivate people because they were all self-motivated before. You don't know what it is that to give somebody critical feedback in a way that they can handle it, because I moved to a foreign country to have somebody tell me what I did wrong 20 times a day. And if he didn't tell me what I was doing wrong, I assumed he wasn't watching. That was my life. That was how I knew you got better. And then I went into consulting in the real world, in the corporate world. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Once a quarter, twice a year, you sit down with somebody and you tell them some things that they are doing well. And then you tell them one thing that they need to maybe improve. And you're not telling them they did it wrong, but that they, think they should consider improving. And then you got to finish with something that's good. How the fuck does anybody get better around here? They don't. That's why they don't. And if you can change that, if you can actually say, these are the things in my life that I was happy with, that I was striving with, and then you can bring those into your world, to circle it all the way back to your original question of how do you come from elite sport and then make it a functional real life, is you got to go back and find the things that really work for you. And again, a lot of those things are going to be tapping into emotions that humans have had for a really long time and actually settling on that. And then once you do that, once you figure out your goals, and it doesn't mean anything specific, it could mean something as specific as selling a company or getting a promotion, or it can just say like, I have a goal to be a good dad. I have a goal to, and here's what good dad means and defining it. I have a goal to be with my friends more and define that. So you actually have something to pursue. And then you actually can stop and go, all right, what about me? The next phase is awareness. What about me is stopping me from doing that? What am I doing? What's around me? What's in my environment? What's my job? What do I need to change, or what do I need to think about to be able to do that? And then what are those things can I control? There's a lot of things that are in your life that you can't control, or you can't control based on certain factors. So what can you control? And then make your decisions. And I think that kind of algorithm is a really simple goals. What is stopping you? And also what about you helps you get there? What are those things you can control? And then what decisions do you have to make? And how do you need to calibrate yourself to be able to do that? When I say, how do you calibrate yourself? I mean, you've probably learned over the years that thinking about and working with people in a certain way helped you more than thinking about and working with them in a different way didn't. So you just started changing the way that I'm going to be a little bit more understanding of people and a little less judgmental of people. And sometimes judging people is helpful for your goal. Sometimes it's not. And you just kind of slide along that scale and be a little less judgmental, a little bit more understanding. And when you run a podcast, it's probably, you've probably gotten really good at understanding that part of people.
Yeah. The curiosity piece is something which leading with curiosity is one, it just makes life more interesting. And two, when you sit down podcasting or coaching or, leading a team, the curiosity about what drives someone else. And, it's different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing, which is I'm finding really fascinating from creating a winning team, is you had this shared vision and you had something that you were all moving towards.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how now you work with execs or entrepreneurs and people in that space. How can you get a team to create this vision together?
Yeah.
So that then the feedback becomes about the vision, about the mission, like you guys with your winning team, rather than about them. It's like, it's because we're going towards this. It sounds like you created that culture, which created your winning team.
Yep. Well, it's a good question about the team versus them. Everybody's going to think about me. I think if you understand that, then you can not judge people for that. So first of all, understanding that, you're going to be able to set the vision, but it needs to be about them. Also, tapping into something that was my email signature is a picture of me when I'm 5 years old wearing the Olympic rings shirt. So I had something in me for that Olympic goal. And it took me a while to find the rest of it in that way. But as a leaders and the people that I work with now, they're struggling with, especially how old are you?
I'm 29.
Yeah, they're struggling with your generation. They're struggling with figuring out how to motivate your generation to work with the broader team, because your generation has grown up on social media, your generation has grown up on the internet, your generation has grown up, in a world that very much focused on them in a way that my generation above, they just didn't. And again, I've moved away from the judgment of that and more to the understanding side, because understanding it is, judgment feels good, judgment feels nice. Like, judgment says it puts you in a place down here and it puts me in a place up here. And that is an instinctual, we want to feel good. But if we can move towards understanding and just say, okay, like, what is it about this generation that is like, what is motivating them? What are they're afraid to be like their parents. We're all afraid to be like our parents. They're afraid to be like their parents. So what is that? So if you can understand that and unpack that, and then if you move it back into the shared vision and goals, that is a human thing. And when we talk about mental health and we talk about, your generation is way more adept at having the conversations around mental health than mine. Like, people use the word vulnerable, me talking about these things earlier. I appreciate that. I would view it more transparency, because vulnerability means harm can come to you. If you have a gun and you're pointing at me and my chest is open, I'm vulnerable. At this stage of my life, me sharing what I share about my mental health struggles in the past I don't see it being a downside for me. I'm able to tap into, have conversations with men in ways that most men aren't. No one role modeled that stuff for us. There was no television characters, no movie characters that were cool if they were struggling with something. They were crazy. Like, my generation, depression meant you were crazy. So understanding these generational differences when it comes to motivating and having those shared goals is a big, big, giant part of leadership. And I think that is one of the quintessential things that, like, a lot of the folks that I work with are struggling with is, but they're not as maybe they're not as money motivated. They're experience motivated, because they're seeing people with money not be happy, and therefore might not be the money that's going to make them happy. The money's going to allow them to do things. And I think that's a really interesting thing to tap into, is how do you provide experiences for people if that's what their goals are, if that's what they want more of. I mean, you're living that life. Like, you get to experience and travel the world, and the money that you make allows you to do that. And as a leader, trying to figure out what people's goals are and help them set their goals so that those ladder into the company goals is really how you can help move the bar, and understanding that as a leader, which takes time. It takes asking, it takes trust that you can tell me as a leader what it is that you want in life. And it might not be that you want to be at this company for 30 years. That's okay. I'm really curious. You do this a lot. You travel the world. You talk to some really interesting people. Like, what are you most curious about that we can talk about, or what are you most curious about in general?
Yeah, I mean, I get most curious about how someone could create a level of success in their life, and then what goes into that, as in what goes into those ingredients, but also how can you create success in your life while also feeling fulfilled in the process? Because I see there's so many, and I've sat down with people who have created a level of success financially or in any other area. Maybe they've been an athlete, a sportsman, and that level of success has come with so many sacrifices that then actually so many people look at that and they go, I want to be like that. They may see a video on social media. They may see someone living a certain lifestyle. They may see someone on camera or someone who's built a massive business. They glorify the result. And they're like, I want that. And then actually when it's broken down to actually what the ingredients that went into creating what they created, they won't pursue it. So it's like this challenge that takes place because they want the success, but are not willing to make the sacrifices to get there, because actually other things are more important to them in their life, which is completely cool. But then it's like, well, let's not glorify the success if, they're not willing to do what it takes to get there.
I'm okay with us glorifying the success. Let's not make ourselves feel bad that we don't have the success.
That's it.
If we can't, if we're not going to do the things to get there.
Yeah, because you realize that other areas are actually more important. So when you look at say, like, you look at Alex Hormozy, who a guy who's blown up in business, and he's got like, he's got massive amounts of followers. I think something like 7 million followers online now, created businesses into multiple millions plus.
Yep.
And so many I hear of like glorifying the results, which what he's done is excellent. And then he's very open about the sacrifices in other areas of his life, which he had to make to get there.
Yeah.
So then naturally, other people may just be like, actually, that's not what I want.
Yep.
Right. But I this is what I want. So it's like defining that vision of what is it that you actually want, like deep down, But I'm curious, because someone who has played at the top level, what are the ingredients that go into excellence?
Yeah, well, let's jump in the excellence thing. And then, we come back to what you just said. When I work with people now, we actually, like, one of the early phases of our work together is I need to understand their goals, and I need to help them understand, help them unpack and clarify their goals in like their working career, their personal wealth, their lifestyle, their relationships, and their health. And we set goals in all of those and understand that. So then all of our decisions are filtered through all of those at all times. See, exactly your point. Like, what do you want? And then we calibrate and do that. So I think what goes into excellence, and we were just talking about this earlier, which was, I think that you see people who have researched about excellence or being the best in the world, and they've written about it and they've talked to people about it. And there's few, and I feel so fortunate, Sam, so fortunate that I got to do that. This like kid that was me, as it feels like a different person now, got to do that and got to be the best in the world and got to be at the pinnacle and live like that. And it is, and I guess maybe I'll stop and maybe let you ask a little bit more targeted question, because, man, when you ask, like, what does it take to be excellence? Like, that is such a broad question. Like, how might you want to break it down?
Yeah, let's start, because I know this is a big part of especially bobsleigh, and I imagine what you do now. Yeah. Let's talk about visualization first of all.
Okay.
What's your visualization routine to help create that picture in your mind of what you really want?
Yep. So I think a few things. There is the picture in your mind of what you really want. Understanding what you really want is a really weird question. Most people don't know what they really want. So I think it is putting the pictures in your head and running through like what it is that you're trying to do. So for us, if we use the sport analogy or the sport experience that I had, we wanted to win. Okay, what does it take to win? It takes being on the line and pushing our sled fast, and then moving with the sled on our way down the hill as our driver Holcomb. So I'm thinking about me. Like, I'm not in Holcomb's head. I'm in my head. So I know that if I'm on the line, I have to be able to drown out all the distractions. I have to not worry about this camera that's going past. I have to not worry about all these other things. Hands are on the sled. I know that my knees have to drop. My elbows have to stay in. My core has to be stable. I have to drop those knees, and I have to keep my feet locked and ankles locked as I go. So I have as much of a spring as I can as I go, and we hit this thing that weighs over 200 kilos. And we're hitting it with all four of us, hitting it is pushing it with all four of us at the same time on a cadence that we're saying out loud that is being echoed between us and the driver. And so we hit this thing at the same time and move this big giant sled. And then as you're running, there's the mechanics and how you're pushing and how you're going from this angle, like a deep angle, and you're slowly coming up and pushing. Then as you go over the crest, so the sled starts to go down, you have to start to roll your hips underneath you, and you have to start moving in this way. And then when the driver's feet come up, you see the driver, he's going to load into the sled at a certain point. So he's going to load in the sled at a certain point. The two-man Justin is going to go 2 steps off of that driver's feet. I'm going to go 4 steps off that driver's feet. The brakeman is going to go 2 steps off of Justin's feet, so the guy behind me. So the 3 spots me, the 4 spots there, we're getting on the sled at the same time. Why? You take a pulley and a bucket and put a bucket on a pulley, and you throw 1 rock in, 2 rocks in, 3 rocks in, 4 rocks in. It kind of slowly goes that. If you throw all 4 rocks in, it accelerates. We're trying to accelerate the sled. Can't put all 4 of you in at the same time. Not enough room. Then you wind up standing up, being a windsock and slowing the sled down and drag. So you're worrying about You're worrying about your body position. You're worrying about your timing. You're worrying about your controlling your adrenals as you go in, because if you step back, you can't have blown out your adrenal glands, hours before or minutes before. You have to save it all. So you have to stay calm, get excited, stay calm, so that, and the moment comes, you've trained yourself there. So you visualize all of those things. But then, you ever, what's the kind of one of the bigger competitions you've done, whether it's sport or whether it's business or anything like that?
I used to be a golfer when I was growing up.
Okay.
So I played a good level of golf, got down to a handicap of 2.
Wow. Yeah. All right. You're never golfing then. That's noted. How did you feel? How were your nerves?
At that time,
yeah,
I wish I knew what I knew now about being able to regulate nervous system. And
so you're pretty nervous.
Yeah, I would get nervous. Do you know the thing fascinating? Yeah. The thing I'd get most nervous for was that if I knew I was winning a competition, I would get most nervous to do the talk afterwards. Like after you've won a golf tournament, you then do a speech and say thank everyone and say thank you for winning. I would be thinking about that on the 17th hole.
Clearly the wrong thing to be thinking about. Yep.
Yeah. So exactly, that was there was things there which could have been
the things there. How was your breakfast the morning of, if you were in the lead of the tournament and you had the breakfast that morning? Were you nervous? Did you have
the breakfast?
Yeah. Did you have problem? Was it harder to eat?
Yeah, sometimes. I remember
butterflies in your stomach.
Yeah, I remember the biggest competition that I played in was a European Championship over in Spain.
Yeah,
and when I got there, I had a migraine before the competition, and I was definitely I've seen a pattern of sometimes getting a migraine before a big event.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I actually won that competition, but it was there was a lot of pre-match stress, nerves, unregulation. Yeah.
So all those things, people have a hard time sleeping. Can you imagine? You're 31 years old. You're only 29 now. You're 31 years old. You've worked your entire life from the age of 10, 20 years. You're going to bed, the bobsled competition's 2 days. You're in the lead by 0.4 of a second, which is a lot of time. Can you imagine what it would be like to sleep that night? Knowing you then have to wake up the next morning and do it again and be as close to perfect again. The nerves of that and actually being able to sleep. How do you sleep when the next day it's like Christmas morning? The next day the present is under the tree. You just have to wake up and do it and get down the stairs and get there. So I would visualize that, back to your visualization. So I'd visualize what breakfast would be like the morning of big competitions. And I would work myself up, and then I would calm myself down, and then I'd eat. Not that morning of the Olympics. I ate the morning of the Olympics, but I ate Olympic morning breakfast hundreds of times before Olympic morning breakfast. I went to sleep and put pressure on myself, and then got myself to calm down and fell asleep hundreds of times. So there wasn't anything that I did that was part of the process of success. Weeks out, you start getting nervous weeks out. I mean, we were Olympic favorites. Start getting nervous weeks out. I knew that was going to happen. So I started practicing years before. So that's the visualization. People focus their visualization so much on the thing they want and the actions they want to take to get there. But they miss out on everything else. It doesn't matter how good you feel and how much you visualize pushing that sled that day if you didn't eat and you didn't sleep. It doesn't matter. You cannot compete against the best in the world at that stage. So I think the visualization, that's how I see visualization from an excellence standpoint, is actually breaking down all of the components that are going to matter to you and going back as far as you can, and then starting to visualize that, and either eating and or just simply visualizing eating, being nervous, or calming yourself so I knew what it would be like. I knew it would have felt like the morning in between those races and the morning of the second day when we were winning. I knew what that would be like.
That's such a powerful share, Steve. Actually looking at visualization, not from just the thing, but actually the process of each
one of the things.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is for excellence. I mean, you won a gold medal at the Olympics. That's the top of the top. It's everything you thought about in the process, and then you had actually visualized it beforehand, going the way that you wanted it to go, right? But also what I'm hearing is the way that you wouldn't want it to go, and then being able to regulate yourself to bring yourself back.
Exactly. Exactly. Because it's not always going to go the way you want. you're going to feel nervous. Like you're going to feel nervous. It's not that I'm saying the visualization will stop you from being nervous. What I'm saying is the visualization will allow you to do the things you need to do while you're nervous and then calm yourself while you're nervous.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think to go deeper into that question too with excellence, a way that we can layer this question is you've been to the Olympics 3 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
1 time, 1 gold. And then what was the difference between your team that won gold and that level of excellence compared to the teams that didn't?
It's a great, that's the right question. Yeah, it's the right question now. We, in 2000, I'll use the 2006 team where we were my second Olympics and we were gold, silver, gold going in. Our driver, Todd Hayes, the drivers tend to be the leaders of the team. Our driver, Todd Hayes, was 2002 Olympic silver medalist. Big, intimidating, 6'4", 240-pound, former Ultimate Fighter. Like, and I don't mean Ultimate Fighter today. I mean Ultimate Fighter like 1990s, early 90s, like no rules Ultimate Fighter guy, like Muay Thai dude who could. He had a hard time getting to Canada a lot because he had some criminal record stuff.
Right.
On his record, that kind of guy. And Todd was very much. Todd wanted to win more than anybody I've ever seen. Todd wanted to win so much that it was and he and I've had this conversation recently. It was a problem for him. And I held a grudge against Todd for a solid 20 years. It was literally just this past March in Lake Placid at the World Championships. I went and watched the guys and Todd and I wanted to specifically have the talk with Todd because I carried around a lot of baggage from this one. And for 4 years, it was a pretty dysfunctional team. Todd was a pretty dysfunctional leader. He wanted to win so bad, and he had the perspective of we are men. Doesn't really matter whether we get along. Doesn't matter how I act. We are men. We will show up in the line on race day, and we will succeed. And again, like that mattered, but the problem is we had no trust between each other. So when we were warming up, this knot in my stomach, and I hadn't quite understood the visualization part that we just talked about. I had a knot in my stomach, and I'd see Todd, and I'd nod, and he'd nod, and Knott was still there, and see Pavli and Brock and the other teammates on that Olympic team, and Pavli, as I mentioned, was on that team, and we'd nod, and that was it. But we didn't have trust between us, so we never had like productive. If you think about, Patrick Lencioni from like a leadership development standpoint, it's like 5 dysfunctions of a team. You can't have results without accountability. You can't have accountability without people committing to the accountability and the results. You can't have commitment unless you've had conflict, unless you and I feel like we both have hammered out what we want to do to commit to. And you can't have productive conflict without trust. So we didn't have trust, and therefore we never were able to have accountability to each other in that way. And I recognize that, because we were gold, silver, gold in the World Cups going into those Olympics. It wasn't if we were going to medal, it's simply what color medal we were going to get. And we finished 7th. It was the worst finish we had in 4 years of like 40 plus World Cups together. That was the worst finish. And I was getting interviewed afterwards. Going into it, everybody wanted to interview you. It was like in America, like Today Show. We did like a live Today shoot, like walking around Torino with a Shroud of Turin, all these things. And everybody wanted. After that 4th heat, man, you have to walk through the mix zone of the Olympics, and you have to go through. That's like kind of the only way out. The only one that wanted to talk to me was a guy named Bucky Gleason from the Buffalo News, which was my hometown paper. And he texts me the day after and apologizes for how the story read. I was like, man, and I knew Bucky quite well. And I was like, dude, I told you those things sitting in the mix zone of the Olympics. Like I understood they were going to, I wanted you to print them. And it was like, I can't believe this just happened. I can't believe our dream and my dream was so close and we blew it. I don't know if I'm ever going to get another chance. All I know is I'm going to learn from this, and I'm going to make sure that if I get another shot like this, that these won't be the things that are going to stop us. And that's basically what the interview had said. So fast forward those 4 years, I made sure that team trusted each other. I made sure that we had the thing that we talked about in between us, that we had the shared goal. We understood what that meant. We were able to give each other feedback, conflict, like, hey, we got to talk about what you're eating that we just talked about. I made sure all those things were present in that team. And I was the only holdover from USA 1 from 2006 to USA 1 to 2010. And I mean, I look back, I had this glorious career of I won like, I think 39 World Cup medals, which is the most that any American push athlete has ever won. Our team that won that gold medal in 2010 just got put in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame this past summer, which for me is incredible. There's only 14 teams in there. It is the Miracle on Ice team, which in America is this 1980 Olympic hockey team that the Americans beat the Soviets. And it was famous across the country. It was the 92 Dream Team, the basketball team, and then now the Night Train, our bobsled team. And that was the difference between those two teams. That the 2006 team, I would say, inarguably was more athletically talented. And the 2010 team was a much more cohesive team. As we went into those games in 2010, the ability for us to trust each other, the ability you get asked these questions in the press conference, the media summits ahead of time, and it was Thursday before opening ceremonies on the Friday, and the press knew that they could get. I would just be transparent. I would just say whatever I was thinking, not obnoxiously, but I would say it. And they asked me, what's it feel like? How's it feel to know that it's been 62 years since America won a gold medal in this sport? And 4-man bobsled is a significant sport in the Winter Olympics. Everybody knows, thanks to Cool Runnings, everybody knows what it is. Yeah. And my response was, it's a funny feeling to know that if we do our jobs, we can win. And I didn't necessarily feel that 4 years ago. If we do our jobs, we can win. And you don't say that. Like, the guys looked at me up there like, what the fuck? Why would you say that? And I wanted them to know it was time to flip the switch, because there is this, and this kind of moves into the next topic, I think, which is like the mindset, that deficit mindset we talked about, that I'm not good enough mindset that we talked about, that is standard. And I've had this conversation with tons of other people who've won Super Bowls and won Olympic gold medals. And there is this innate drive that, like, that's the thing that gets you up in the morning. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not fast enough. Therefore, I need to eat. I need to sleep. I need to do all these. I need to keep stress levels down. I need to do all these things so I can be the thing that I feel I need to be and be ready. But at some point, you can't do anything about that anymore. At some point, you can't get stronger. At some point, you can't get faster. At some point, you can't know more about your sport. You have to just be okay with what you have and walk to the line and be ready. Because if you show up at the line feeling not good enough, it's not going to go so well. So I wanted to start to flip the switch for the guys. And I wanted them just to feel, if we do our jobs, we can win. I'm not saying we're going to win. I'm still putting an action in our control, which is doing our jobs. And doing our jobs at this point meant sleeping well, eating well, not partying amongst, we had 2 weeks still until we were competing, not partying amongst the village, just doing our jobs. And that, like, mindset flip for everybody was, I think, a really key factor in how we wound up showing up, because we felt like we were ready. And at that point, I became the leader of the team. Steve Holcomb and I had those conversations. Holcomb was a bit introverted. He was, dealing with his own. Holcomb had a lot of issues and personal challenges. He had lost his vision at one point and had surgery. Experimental surgery had fixed it, but that had already created a cascading issues with alcohol, issues with depression, issues with self-doubt for him. So I became the mouthpiece to the coaching staff. I became the leader of the team in that way. So I understood it was on me to try to flip that switch in a positive way, as opposed to how Todd and our team worked in 2006.
Got you. Yes, I'm hearing the difference between the 2006 and the winning team and the gold medal team. Like, trust was the foundation, which I'd love to dive into. Yeah, like how you, like, we have kind of gone there, but even deeper, like, how can someone create a level of trust around their team, whether that their team be their organization or whether their team be their home team. So I'd love to go there. But before we do, you mentioned about that when you looked at Todd and you had this knot in your gut.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just curious to speak to that knot. Like, what was it that you needed in that time that you felt like you didn't get?
I didn't know what I needed at that point. I knew it just wasn't. I didn't know that you could actually resolve your nerves a bit through connection with your team. I didn't know that was a thing in 2006. Therefore, I hadn't even recognized it at the time, because it was normal for me. It was normal, that pit, that like aching, just nerves. And again, you can imagine how that builds at the Olympic Games and all the media and all the things and all the external pressures. So how we adjusted that was like, by the time those games came, a few things had happened. One, Justin Olson had joined our team and replaced Pavle. And Justin was I was 31, Justin was 22. And he was young, and it was his first games. It was only his third year in the sport at that time. And his first year, and he hates when I talk about this, Justin, so I won't go too deep on it, but Justin was a bit of a train wreck his first year in the sport. It was a train wreck. He was having fun. You were having fun, Olson. And he was just having a good time. It was his first year in the sport. He's traveling to Europe. He's 19 or probably 19, 20 years old. You weren't even legal to drink alcohol in America. And he's in Europe and he's legal to drink alcohol. And he joined our team because he showed up, man. I've never seen a turnaround. If he is an N of one of what turning yourself around looks like. It's like, sometimes you need research. Sometimes you need all these different, multiple layers to understand and get it. And sometimes you need just the footprint on the moon tells you we can go to the moon. That's all I need to do is see the footprint. I need the N of one. Olson is the N of one of turning your shit around. He was from Kurt and my perspective, Kurt Domasevich, the other teammate, he was a train wreck. He went to Lake Placid that summer and he trained and focused and ate and did all the things. And he showed up in August here in Calgary and whooped everybody's ass in individual pushing in our push championships, which elevated him to be, at the moment, the best, fastest pushing athlete in the country. And he got put on our team. And we had to have a sit down and be like, all right, we got to if this is our team, if this is the team that is going to be our thing, this is going to be my last Olympics at this point. I know I'll be 31 in Vancouver. In those Olympics, I knew there was no more 35 like that. There was guys that were hungry and big coming up, chomping at my heels. So I had to be Justin's vice. I put as much pressure on him as humanly possible. And he did not like me for quite a long time. And he still has some hangovers to that. And we had some really great conversations this past summer when we got put in the Hall of Fame. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure that none of the external pressure could be more than the pressure I could put on him. So he trusted me that I would say and do these things. So when it comes to building trust, it's transparency. He understood what the expectations were. He understood that. And I was consistent. Trust comes from transparency and consistency. Because if you're not consistent, then people don't know what they're going to get on a day-to-day basis. And how can they trust what their day is going to be like if they don't know what they're going to get? If you're a volatile boss and you treat different situations in different ways, be consistent. So by the time the games happened, I was turning that dial on the team down of changing it hey, we're good enough now. And then on Justin, I was starting to turn the pressure down. And that was all that mattered to him. Right. If he could get out from the thumb of Mesler, life was good. And I think it was a really helpful thing for us. And we did it pretty consciously at that point. So that team, by the time that team came together and when we warmed up for those Olympics in Vancouver, man, I can remember it was snowing, it was snowing in Whistler, which meant it snowed and accumulated, kind of just got wet. And the ground was wet, and we're warming up, and I walked past Olson, and I punched him in the gut as hard as I could, and he just laughs, and this big ogre laugh. He was a big man-child back then, and he just laughed, and that knot in my stomach started to go away. And I'd see Kurt. Kurt was this Midwestern Nebraska dude, quiet guy, and we just kind of do one of these together, just a little good head nod, the knot would go away. And then Holcomb and I had this connection through this thing called the Holkie dance. You ever the Humpty Dance, this digital underground rap song from the 90s. You get a song in your head and you kind of just put random words in it. I had years before started singing this thing, the Holkie Dance is your chance. It's YouTube, it's all over the place. Yeah. NBC had picked it up. We were doing it on the Today Show. We were singing it. And I would just yell it across the parking lot. And Holcomb would stop whatever he's doing. He'd just do his little dance. And the knot would go away. And then we were ready. And that level of trust with each other, that we could do that with each other in the biggest moments of our lives, allowed us to keep our cortisol levels down until they needed to spike, keep everything relaxed until we needed to turn them on when we stepped to the line. And that was just so intentionally done and so intentionally thought through, to the point where, you see these things that are, Hubermans and things like that are talking about nervous system and regulation. Now, Stu and I were working on this stuff in 2009, 2010, to the point where Stu had me putting my hand on Justin's shoulder moments before we went to the line, because that hand on somebody's shoulder creates the connection. Touch creates connection, which is a primal goal of ours, that connection, that need for tribal connection. It's just subconsciously letting him know I'm here. So I'm standing there with my hand on his shoulder as they're flipping the sled over, intentionally doing something to keep Justin calm. And what's that doing for me? That's me taking an action to relieve any anxiety I have, because I'm doing something to help. And it was just like a pure perfect machine. And we were going against the guy who had never lost. Andre Lange, the German driver, and his team, he'd never lost the Olympics. He had 4 gold medals, 4 races, and he wound up with a silver medal in that one.
This is so powerful. Like that share there is so powerful, because people can use that in sport, or when they're speaking, or when they're stepping into something and their nerves are there. It's that what I'm hearing there is you as a team learn how to co-regulate. So what I'm hearing is, you learn how to co-regulate. Were you taught that? Is that your coach that taught you that? Did you just figure it out?
We figured it out while also, like, Stu and I would have here in Calgary, we would, we spent 6-7 months together basically every day in the off season. And then the in season, he was with us some of the time, and he was elsewhere other times. And it was just over discussion and over conversation. And he was always learning. And that was a neat thing. We had access to people, man. Like John Berardi, nutritionist, Precision Nutrition founder.
The regulation piece, like when you know how to regulate and co-regulate, it's like, how do you create an intimate relationship if you can't do that?
Yep.
But you're using the analogy from a team, and someone, for example, who's speaking on stage. It's like you need to know how to regulate before, or else you go on stage and your prefrontal cortex is just offline because you're in a stress response, and then you can't get your words out, right? So it's
So we were working on all of these things, and we needed to tap into the amygdala. I am this person. I had to be a different person the moment I went to push a bobsled. That was animalistic. You were needing to both be able to hold your prefrontal cortex so you can actually hold all these, like you had to create so many things that became motor and automatic. So you didn't actually need to have the prefrontal cortex online. It was just happening. But you need to go to the amygdala because you need to tap into all of the adrenals and all of the fight or flight responses and all of these things that have your entire body and muscles and system fire at this insane intensity for 5 seconds. Like it was wild. It was wild to be able to do, and then be able to pull that forward in life.
Yeah. That and that's a skill in itself to be able to tap into that. All right, so Steve, I absolutely love the conversation. There's been so many golden nuggets in there about your personal stories too, and now I'm curious how, like, just to tie all this up, like, how are you using your experiences that you've learned from successes, from the challenges, from the failures, let's call them failures, but like when you didn't get to the goal, and also from learning everything that you've shared today about your different teammates and the regulation, like, how are you tying that all together now with the work that you do?
Yeah, it evolved, and we didn't have the space to go into the 15 years since that moment, really, which was building an organization and learning. We talked a little bit about learning to lead and some of the leadership development work I did, but then being CEO of a place for 12 years and growing it from my kitchen to now we've handed it off, and now I chair the board, and there's a new CEO, and it's a very, very successful organization doing amazing things in schools across North America. And then I sat on the board of directors for 8 years, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, where we dealt with gymnastics scandals. And I was in boardrooms with Fortune 100 CEOs and leaders, and we dealt with all of those things, let alone athlete performance and helping athletes through. And I think as I look at the good fortune I've had to be able to be at the top of the pinnacle of sport, and then getting to be at the top of the pinnacle of the Classroom Champions is hands down the best, sport for education organization in the world. I got to sit at the board table and I was the first athlete to chair a committee at the U.S. Olympic Committee in over 10 years, when I chaired our nominating governance committee and was on a bunch of different things there. And I got to have these like really amazing ups and experiences with amazing people in pressure situations. And, when you're building a business, you're seeing payroll at the edge of the horizon to all these other things. And then the downs and the depression and those struggles. And I think what I get to do now is leverage that experience and leverage and be able to say to somebody, look, do you want to be the best in the world at what you do? Cool. I've been there. Let's talk that through. Do you want to lead? Do you want to grow this company? Okay, great. I've been there in these ways as well. Let's do that. Do you want to understand how to do all these other areas? And then also, how do you tap into it for yourself and connect all of these dots? How do you connect the things that we were talking about with whether it's prefrontal cortex and amygdala and be able to keep those things online or understand how to change them and toggle them to how do you understand how to train yourself physically so well that when you have your big board meeting, that morning is your gnarliest, wickedest VO2 max workout. And to understand that that's not going to make you tired, that's actually going to make you more focused and what's happening in your body when you can do that. And it means you can't just show up that day. You have to understand and rejig your week every week and look what you had. I wanted to show up for you, and I wanted to show up for your audience today. And I did my gnarly, nasty Bex Gentry Peloton intervals workout this morning. So I feel so fortunate that at this stage of my life, and then I've got two amazing kids and an amazing wife at home, that I am comfortable with who I am. I am comfortable with what I've accomplished. I am proud of and comfortable with the failures and that I've had because I've learned from them. And one could call them failures, or one could say there is no failure as long as you're learning from it and it didn't kill you. Short of that, it's just another learning stage and process. And I am just so thrilled that I get to meet people like you and have these conversations and talk through the questions, because you make me think more and you challenge me to think about these things in a way that I haven't before. And then I get to do this on a daily basis now, working with people who are trying to do really big and awesome things. It is really hard to grow a company. It's really hard to get, when you get your, first, venture capital or private equity money in, it's hard to deal with that. It's hard to know how to take that extra $50 million or $100 million and how to do it and do that. And I get to work with people and help them regulate themselves and help them lead better. And I'm just very, content with that part of my life these days.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And the one extra piece on that as well is giving back with kids as well, right?
Yeah.
For the next generation. Like,
I get to sit back, and my sister and I see
how much for that?
Oh, I mean, I think we've raised over $70-80 million at this point now. I mean,
Amazing.
Reach over 5 million kids.
Amazing.
They're at Seth Rosenzweig is our CEO, and he will take it to the next level. And that's the thing. I mean, it is an idea that will change the way sports franchises and teams interact with their communities, because they're the most popular brand. They're the most apolitical thing. Man, in North America these days, well, in the world, sports is the only thing that cuts through. It's the only, if you go to America, everybody in downtown Brooklyn, where my sister is, and everybody in rural Texas is watching the NFL, they're cheering for Team USA. It's the only thing they're all doing together. They go into a stadium and they're not bickering about politics. They're just cheering for the ball. I was in Buffalo last weekend, where I'm from, and I brought my daughter for her first Bills, get the pilgrimage for the indoctrination, and it was very successful. But no one in there no one at the tailgate, no one in the stadiums talking about politics. They're focused on sports, and we get to take sports and distill all the things you and I talked about and teach that to kids. Imagine if kids could understand the things we're talking about today, how much different their lives will be, how much more control and the personal responsibility they will feel over their own feelings, over their own actions, and over their successes, whether they are in places like Camden, New Jersey, which is rife with poverty, and there is a really difficult ability for kids to escape that cycle, or whether they are in a private school somewhere else and they're dealing with mental health issues and another barrier. So we're taking that athlete mindset and putting it into a curriculum for kids and teachers in schools, and it's classroomchampions.org for those out there. And it is just doing amazing things now.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, changing that for the next generation and, getting into the minds, into bodies of kids when they're young, so that they can actually learn how to take this athlete mindset and transform their life. That's awesome.
If you learn it in school, it's just what you know.
Yeah.
Look, my age, dude, Pluto was a planet. I have a hard time thinking Pluto's not a planet because I learned it in school. And if we can get these kids to understand that there's a process to setting goals and reaching them, there's a process to feedback, there's a process to emotional regulation. That's a topic as well in the curriculum. If that's just something they learned in school, then it sticks. It's a lot stickier.
Yeah, it's just the norm.
Yeah.
We'll leave that in the show notes as well.
So that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so that the audience can easily find it. And the last part of the show is we'll just do a quick fire round. We have the vault section.
All right.
So each guest, there's 10 mystery messages.
Okay.
And each guest leaves a message. And so you'll leave a message today, and then that could be the next episode or 10 episodes time that someone pulls it out, your name gets read, and we like to share like the message will land for something. It's actually fascinating how across the conversations so often the message that's read is directly related to exactly what we spoke about. It's like it's very, very interesting. And so you open to doing a pick out of the vault.
All right. Well, we're going to right off the top. Help me read that.
Oh, yeah, let's go. And do you want me to read it for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so people...
I can read, really. I just... that.
Yeah, no, yeah. It says, so people will give us people and circumstances to show us where we are not fully free. That's Peter Crone. And then this is from Ryan Harrington, who was previously on the show. Where are you not free currently? That's the question.
That's the question. Where am I not free currently? I am not free by choice and by love from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. and from 5:30 to 8 p.m. because there is nowhere I'd rather be than with my children, which means that I have less freedom in those times. And I am extremely happy with that part of my life.
That's beautiful. Appreciate you sharing, man. And thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, brother.
Legend.
This was great.
Cheers, Steve.